Good morning, everyone. I'm so thrilled to join my colleague, Minister Bethlenfalvy, for this announcement today, as well as with Dr. Karin Schnarr. This is very exciting for me personally, but should also be very exciting for all Ontarians. While we live in a province that values inclusion and equal opportunity, we know that women and girls in Ontario still face many barriers. Women remain unrepresented in many key sectors of the economy, and we know that Indigenous women, racialized women, immigrant women, and women living with disabilities tend to experience even greater barriers. While we have been working on these issues for years, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated many of the barriers women face, making the change all the more urgent. From the very early stages of the pandemic, we knew we couldn't allow years of progress on women's economic empowerment to be undone. And our government wanted to ensure women would not be left behind as our provincial economy recovered. Our government has held numerous roundtables from the beginning of COVID with women across many sectors to listen and better understand the challenges they have faced. These were opportunities to gain insight into how we can best support women full economic participation, and allowed those from across the province to provide their feedback on how we can better support women full economic participation, as well as to identify ways to stimulate economic growth, create jobs, and make life affordable. We have taken numerous steps to support women through initiatives like the Women's Economic Security Program and Investing in Women's Future program. In my previous role with the Minister of Labour, Training and Skills Development, a lot of great work was being done to get more women and unrepresented groups back into the workforce, including in areas like the skilled trades. But we know that progress must go on. It cannot be temporary. It cannot only be during crisis. We need to create lasting changes that have a positive impact on women and our economy. This is why we have established our task force on women and the economy. This task force, which will be informed by diverse voices from the public, private and not-for-profit sector, will help address the unique and disproportionate economic barriers women face, which have been heightened through COVID-19. We know that women have tremendous skills to offer employers in post-pandemic. Ontario offers us a unique opportunity to change the story, women in our economy. I will pass it over to Mr. Bethlenfalvy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone, and thank you, Minister McKenna. That has a nice sound to it. I'm so pleased to be here with Minister McKenna, our new Associate Minister of Children and Women's Issues, and Dr. Schnarr, to kick off Ontario's Task Force on Women and the Economy. You know, COVID-19 has touched everyone and all of our lives over the past 15 months. Yet it is impossible to ignore a very clear pattern in the way the pandemic has disproportionately affected Ontario's mothers, daughters, and sisters. While employment among men had dropped by 3.1% during COVID-19, it went down by over 5% for women. This is partly because women are more likely to work the type of jobs that have been most impacted by the necessary public health measures and restrictions, such as customer service or hospitality. Mothers also tend to carry a greater load when it comes to caring for our children or relatives. While our government has introduced a number of supports to address these issues, including enhancing the childcare tax credit, as well as our plan to increase childcare spaces, new childcare spaces by 30,000 spaces, more than 20,000 of which have already been approved as of this past winter, we know that many economic barriers that hold women back are unfortunately deeply ingrained. We also know that COVID-19 has brought about a lasting change to our economy. That's why, in our budget 2021, earlier this year, we committed to creating a task force a task force specifically geared towards ensuring inclusive economic growth so that everyone in this province can have the same opportunity to thrive and contribute to our shared success. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous nous sommes engagés dans notre budget de 2020-21, plutôt cette année, à créer un groupe de travail qui se consacrerait à veiller à l'inclusivité de la croissance économique, pour que l'ensemble de la population professionnelle puisse avoir des chances égales de prospérer et de contribuer à notre succès collectif. The need for action is so urgent. We are taking a targeted approach designed to yield meaningful advice to inform our upcoming policy work. The task force will be chaired by Dr. Karin Schnarr of Wilfrid Laurier University, Associate Professor of Policy and Law at the Lazaridis School of Business and Economics, where she also serves as the Director of the Undergraduate Business Program. I know Dr. Schnarr has the leadership skills, the experience, and the expertise to not only examine the obstacles faced by women in our workforce honestly, but also to help find solutions. Now I'd like to pass it over to Dr. Schnarr. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Bethlenfalvy. I'm so pleased to take on the chair of Ontario's Task Force on Women in the Economy and to work with the talented members of the task force who will bring a broad range of expertise and experience in supporting women's economic participation. I've been fortunate to have lived and worked in Ontario all of my life. I'm currently an Associate Professor of Business at the Lazaridis School of Business and Economics at Wilfrid Laurier University, where I'm finishing my term as the director of our BBA programs, which have over 4,000 students. This role affords me the opportunity to hear directly, and often very vocally, from our student populations about how prepared they feel when they enter university and the skills we have provided them when they are about to leave university. I also teach strategy in our MBA program and will become the director of our MBA program at the Lazaridis School on July 1st. Our MBA students often choose to pursue that degree because they're looking to upgrade their skills and pivot their careers into different areas. My work at the Lazaridis School as a teacher, administrator, faculty mentor, and volunteer has given me insight into our female students and the unique challenges as they look to apply for co-op jobs, full-time jobs, graduate schools, and career pivots. I love having this chance for one-on-one connection as it's real-time feedback about the opportunities and the barriers that they face. I'm also a mom to 2 teenage girls, Alexis and Morgan. As they prepare for decisions related to post-secondary education, we have had many conversations as a family about the challenges and the opportunities they will experience over the next few years as the economy evolves, both in response to COVID and the global environment. And that's one of the reasons I am so honored to be here today. While the COVID-19 pandemic has been challenging for everyone, we know that women have been disproportionately affected by it. A recent report by RBC Economics noted that women were already at higher risk of disruption prior to COVID-19, as they held more than half of the 35% of Canadian jobs susceptible to automation. In addition, in the sectors that have been most impacted by important and necessary pandemic containment measures, namely hospitality and retail, women make up more than half of these employed. Women the hardest hit include youth, visible minorities, newcomers, and moms. Ontario's Task Force on Women in the Economy will seek to address the unique and disproportionate economic barriers women face, particularly in an economy that will look very different after COVID-19. These areas include supporting women as they enter and re-enter the workforce, supporting women's entrepreneurship and small business, and removing barriers for women as they enter fields in which they are underrepresented. All of these are key areas to ensure that women are full participants in Ontario's economy. The task force will focus on exploring best practices and recommendations related to ensuring women are full participants in Ontario's economy. These are innovative ideas. There are innovative ideas already being used in other provinces and countries from which we can learn. The task force will also consult with a diverse group of stakeholders whose work touches on women's participation in the economy and Ontario's workforce in these three key areas. I look forward to sharing the task force's findings and recommendations with the ministers so that we can ensure women are not left behind as Ontario's economy rebuilds from the effects of COVID-19. Thank you, and I will now turn it back to Minister McKenna for questions.
We'll now go to the phone line for questions. One question and one follow-up, please. Thank you.
First question from Richard Southern at 680 News. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everybody. For the Finance Minister, please. Sir, two parts to this question. We've seen in Japan this week, the government there recommend a permanent 4-day work week for companies. Part of that had to do with keeping women in the workplace. I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on if that would work here. And also, sir, if this task force recommends a higher minimum wage, because we know women work more minimum wage jobs than men, if the task force, sir, recommends a higher minimum wage, would your government institute that?
Well, thank you, Richard, for the questions. First with regard to Japan and the workforce, part of my work as president of the Treasury Board, which I've very gladly passed on now to Minister Prabmeet Sarkaria to continue that work, is to look at the return to workplace strategy. Companies right across Ontario are looking at their workforces, and of course the Ontario Public Service is doing the same, and of course our broader public service. Combined, I think we employ over 1 million people in Ontario. So we'll be looking at that very closely and the type of structures, because the world has changed with COVID-19. With regard to the second, I'm really looking, I'm not going to prejudge anything that Dr. Schnarr and her incredible team of people on the task force from right across Ontario, a range of experiences or backgrounds. I think that we will listen. The whole idea was to move fast so that it could help inform the Finance Minister and all ministers and the Premier in terms of the types of things we should be looking about, not only for women, but for economic recovery. Because we're getting to the end of defeating the pandemic. It's looking good, knock on wood. We have more to do, and then we really are going to focus on economic recovery. We've already started that, but we have a lot more to do, both short-term and long-term.
Follow-up, Richard?
Thank you. So you're not closing the door, I take it, to minimum wage. And also, sir, you mentioned the civil service in Ontario. Are they coming back to the office? We've seen companies, sir, some of them start to sell off their office space because they're not bringing everyone back. Are the Ontario civil service, are they coming back to the office? And are you planning to sell any office space if not?
Well, we're constantly reviewing our options. The Ontario Public Service, some just over 60,000 employees, and I got to tell you, Richard, they have worked around the clock through COVID-19. Many people don't realize. For example, the chair of Treasury Board met over 100 times, I think about 125 times. That's unprecedented since COVID. That's about 3 years worth of work right there in 1 year. And now our Ontario Public Service are champions in terms of putting the materials together, working around the clock and never complaining. So thank you to them. In terms of looking at strategies, I'm also very pleased to be the Minister of Digital and Data, and with new Associate Minister Khalid Rashid, who's our Associate Minister of Digital, which includes looking at many aspects of how the workforce of tomorrow looks, how you use digital tools, how do we connect people, how do we serve citizens better. And that's going to have implications for the workforce and the return to work. But now I've handed that over to Prabmeet Sarkaria, and he'll have a lot more to say in the coming weeks and months as we reopen safely our economy.
Next question.
Next question from Colin DeMello at CTV News. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Minister. There are some calls for a sales tax holiday over the summer months to really incent shoppers to visit businesses that have been hard hit by the pandemic. Is the government willing to eliminate the sales tax over the next few months in order to spur the economy?
What we are focused on, Colin, as you know, to get us to this point, we announced in Budget 2020 and Budget 2021 a number of measures to help businesses bridge to recovery. So, for example, the small business grant, which is close to $3 billion, 100,000 companies, property tax, electricity relief for our small businesses, the travel and tourism grant, and I could go on. What's really important is that we now bridge to a successful reopening. The best stimulus for an economy, I think, is to reopen these businesses. I'm so happy and glad that we're reopening Stage 2 on June 30th, so many can get a haircut. Many of our barbers and hairstylists have really, they've suffered. It's been very frustrating. That's why we provided 2 rounds of small business grants to them, for example, and allowed the payment of property tax and electricity to get to this point. But the best thing we can do now to support our small businesses, which are really the backbone of the Ontario economy. I'm not sure people realize how many small businesses we have in this province, how many risk takers, how many entrepreneurs that we have, and that's what's so important in this recovery, and to support them. They're often the identity of our communities. And I might ask Dr. Schnarr to just maybe comment a little bit more on the task force and supporting those small businesses and some of her thoughts.
Thank you, Minister. We know that the majority of businesses in Ontario are small businesses that employ less than 50 workers. And so we know that this has been a particularly challenging time for them. We look forward, we have women on the panel who have expertise and personal experience working in small business. We're looking forward to hearing from them directly, but also through the consultations that we will be holding, hearing from Ontarians that were affected by that, hearing it through the submissions that we will be receiving as a task force as well, to get Ontarians' thoughts about their challenges, particularly the challenges of women who are working in small business, often with their families, where it's been a particularly challenging and difficult time. So as the Minister said, we are looking forward, I think, first and foremost to Ontario going into Stage 2 later this week, early next week, and making sure that families get back to working, those small businesses start opening, but also that we come up with some solutions as a task force, some recommendations as a task force that we can provide to government that have both immediate, medium and long-term impacts to help them survive in Ontario and thrive in Ontario.
Great. Follow-up, Colin?
Thank you. Back to the Minister. So, I mean, you're acknowledging that these businesses have taken enormous risks. A lot of them have also taken an enormous amount of debt in order to just survive the pandemic. Some people qualified for the small business grants, and some business owners simply did not qualify for the business grants. I'm wondering, what level of responsibility do you think the government holds here in ensuring that these businesses survive? If it was the government that initially told these businesses that they had to close in the first place. In the next few months, don't you feel like the government should be providing additional financial incentives and additional incentives to shoppers to shop at those stores? Because you told them to close, shouldn't you also be there to help them survive?
Colin, as you know, in the budget that I tabled in March, we announced $23 billion, a cumulative amount of $23 billion to support businesses in this province. And we also announced over $16 billion of supports for our healthcare system, and indirect supports of another $10 or $12 billion, almost $50 billion of supports. And I'm very pleased to say I would do it all over again to support the businesses, to support our economy, to support workers. A number of initiatives, not only the small business grant, but there's almost $600 million of job training, retraining, skilled trades, job training tax credit, the micro-credentials that we announced in the budget, some over $1 billion to help workers as well, another $1 billion to help families through the early learning program, another almost $1 billion. So we spared no expense. The Premier said we'd spare no expense, and this Finance Minister and Treasury Board President followed through on that. What we can do best now, I think, is reopen safely, and that's why it's been frustrating for many, but that we're on a path with uncertainty still out there. The Delta variant, we see what's happening in the UK. They've had to delay their reopening for 4 weeks. We have taken these measures, listened to the science and the medical evidence, and I think working together, and almost 15 million Ontarians working together to reopen safely. And I will say this in the end, there has been a lot of pent-up demand, And I encourage everyone to shop local, to get your haircut, to support our small businesses. And I know that all Ontarians will rise up and help these businesses get back on their feet. Thank you.
Next question.
Next question from Matt Smart at Radio Canada. Please go ahead.
Oui, bonjour. Ma question est pour le ministre des Finances. C'est une question en français. Je me demandais si vous aviez un échéancier en tête pour la mise en œuvre de nouvelles mesures pour aider les femmes à se relever après la pandémie, parce que, bon, j'imagine que le temps presse pour les femmes. Elles ont besoin d'assistance de la part du gouvernement. C'est bien de créer un groupe de travail, d'avoir des consultations, mais concrètement, ça ne va pas changer leur situation. Alors, avez-vous un échéancier assez serré pour passer à l'action?
Merci pour la question. Merci pour la question. Enfin, c'est pourquoi cette task force aujourd'hui qu'on annonce, que j'ai annoncé dans le budget 2020-2021, est là. Parce qu'on sait, chaque fois il y a une crise économique, financière, ou comme ceci, une pandémie, il y a toujours des femmes qui ont des résultats plus dur que l'autre. Alors, enfin, c'est très important qu'on écoute de tous les Ontariens et les Ontariennes c'est ce qu'il a passé pendant la pandémie de COVID-19 et d'écoute pour avoir des policies pour informer le ministre des Finances et mes collègues, parce que c'est très important dans cette situation. On a une voie ouverte, une discussion avec des experts comme Dr. Schnarr et ses collègues dans cette task force. Merci pour cette question.
Follow-up, Matt?
Oui, j'ai mes collègues du sport qui me demandent, je sais que vous avez grandi en partie à Montréal, M. Bethlenfalvy, je me demandais qu'est-ce que vous aviez pensé de la victoire du Canadien et qu'est-ce que vous pensez de l'équipe qui se dirige en finale de la Coupe Stanley maintenant? C'est une très bonne question. Comme peut-être vous savez, je suis né à Montréal, à Saint-Lambert, la Rive-Sud. Je suis premièrement un Canadien, un fan des Canadiens. Et c'est bon pour Montréal, c'est bon pour le Québec, mais c'est en plus très bon pour le Canada. Je suis fier des habitants, des Canadiens qui ont gagné hier soir. Ça fait longtemps, 1993, je crois, qu'on a gagné la Coupe Stanley. Mais enfin, si c'était Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Calgary, Edmonton, je crois que c'est très bon pour une équipe canadienne qui nous représente dans cette Coupe finale. Merci.
Next question.
Next question from David Haynes at Queen's Park Briefing. Please go ahead.
Hi there, Minister. Hope you're doing well. I'd like to go for a question about tax breaks. The Financial Accountability Office says it found some evidence of tax cuts that have been planned for but have not been announced, both personal income tax and corporate taxes that are baked into your government's fiscal forecast. Is the FAO right? Are you planning to cut to taxes?
You know, that remains to be seen. We're dealing with COVID-19 right now, David, and thanks for that question. You know, I was first of all, thanks the Financial Accountability Officer for his report and his team's report. I think the work they do is extremely important. Being a private sector person now in politics, I think transparency and accountability are so critical for democracy to work. So very thankful for the work that his office does. I was also very pleased to see that, you know, in terms of the near-term outlook, they very much agreed with our numbers. That's important. That and I want to remind everyone, we put out our plan. We're one of the few provinces to say we have a path to balance. We think fiscal responsibility is important, hasn't gone away. These deficits in the short term are necessary. I would do it all over again, but they're not sustainable nor desirable in the long term. So very proud that we put out a plan, a path to balance with fiscal anchors. And by August 15th, David, I'm going to be in front of you again and the people of Ontario telling you how we spent your money in the first quarter And of course, in the future, all policy measures are something that the Minister of Finance, the Premier of Ontario, has to consider. Right now, we are very focused on defeating this pandemic and very focused on economic recovery. And I would just end by saying I'm also pleased to say that all 4 credit rating agencies have, after reviewing the budget, confirmed and affirmed the ratings of the province of Ontario.
Follow-up, David?
Some groups have shared some concerns about these rumored tax cuts, as your fiscal forecast would also require some sizable cuts, not to mention some fairly high deficits because of pandemic spending. How would you balance those competing priorities in that context?
Yeah, thanks, David. You know, I did say at the time of the budget that my preference would be to not raise taxes, to continue the program spending, and I've laid it all out in the budget for everyone to see, including yourself. I've laid out the path to balance. I've laid out the deficit targets, but I've also continued to put in significant funds to combat COVID, because even as we defeat COVID, and we will defeat COVID, it won't go away completely. So that's why in the budget I put $1 billion in for vaccinations. I put another $2.3 billion in for contact tracing. You know, new variants of concern that come in through our borders that we've got the resources, people and financial resources to go after those variants as they come in. We've seen what happened in Waterloo and how quickly the variants can, and the Delta variant can take hold. The Finance Minister's #1 responsibility is to provide the fiscal resources and the human resources to the government to be able to do the job to defeat the pandemic. But as well, I've not lost my eye on the long term. And, you know, economic recovery is a big part of how we're going to hit those targets. And I would point out, since we tabled the budget in February, we had locked the numbers in February, tabled the budget in March, the economic forecast for Ontario was 4%. It looks now it's about 5.5%. The U.S. economy at the time we had said was going to be 4.9%. In some corners, private sector saying it's going to be 7%. So I'm an optimist, glass half full person, and I think that economic recovery and the ingenuity and innovation and the ability of many Ontarians to spend money and support their local businesses will really help us achieve our goals.
Okay, thanks, David. And we now just have a question from the floor.
Hello, Minister. I'm asking about the opening of the economy. We're looking at the numbers today are below 300. They are extremely low given the population of Ontario. Take away a few of the hot spots, it's even lower, very easy to contact manage if there is an outbreak. And why aren't we fully opening the economy right now? We're talking about a few hundred people in all of Ontario that have COVID.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think that we tabled our plan. We were very transparent with the people of Ontario, what it required, what we were looking at to open safely for stage 1, to have a 21-day period in between step 1 and step 2. We beat it by a couple of days, but that gives us, the scientists, the health table, time to analyze the data, and I don't think anyone wants a 4th lockdown. I think that would just not be acceptable, and we want to protect Ontarians. So we'll continue with our plan. We'll continue to listening to the experts and the data as they follow a very complex set of circumstances that we've seen in other parts of the world. We've seen here right in Ontario with the Delta variant and other type variants. And so that's why, and I think we're going to stick to our plan and continue to listen to the specialists and the evidence that's out there. I want to just ask Jane McKenna to maybe come up for a second and just maybe talk a little bit about the economic recovery and how she sees the task force to help that reopening that you just asked about.
Thank you so much, Minister. I want to say, obviously, you know, in the 2021 budget, when we brought that forward, it was very thoughtful of the Premier and obviously Minister Bethlenfalvy to make sure that we realized, you know, we had issues obviously prior with women disproportionately affected by it, but I have 5 children, as everyone knows. I've got 4 girls. My daughter is a nurse, 39 years old, who I'm going to hopefully see tomorrow. She has 2 kids and a single mom and working, and she was absolutely thrilled that Dr. Schnarr was coming up with this task force, with this government. because we, need to hear from the people on the front to make sure that people get back to work, re-enter, reopen, obviously look at apprenticeship, entrepreneurship like myself that I was before, and just to make sure with skilled trades, as everyone knows, we've got such a massive shortage. And also with STEM. So we're grateful. I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of this. Just got into this obviously shortly, but very excited with this group of people that are here and looking forward to the outcomes, bringing that forward for policy for the people of Ontario.
Follow up to the Minister. We're seeing the tragedy in Saskatchewan, the tragedy in BC. I know you've allocated $10 million to find unmarked graves in Ontario, but we're looking at such a huge problem. $10 million, given the fact that April Wash, the death of W. George cost the province almost $500 million. $10 million is insignificant. Is there any plans to increase that amount and have an organized investigation into Ontario?
Yeah, first off, let me say, you can't be a human being and not be devastated by the announcement out of Saskatchewan, the announcement out of BC, and all the findings in the Truth and Reconciliation report from a few years ago. So my deep concern, I speak on behalf of all of us in government. I think I speak on behalf of all Ontarians when I say that that is a tragic part of our history. I'm very proud of Premier Ford and Minister Greg Rickford, who moved very quickly to announce not only the funding of $10 million, but how it would be deployed, and very thoughtfully and inclusively with a number of First Nation and Indigenous peoples who are impacted, to make sure that we do it together, that we do it very thoughtfully. And again, as Finance Minister, money is not the question here. I will provide the resources necessary to do the job. What the job here is to be compassionate, to be thoughtful, to do it collectively, to do it together. This is important work for all Ontarians, for all Canadians, and we won't spare any effort to make sure that it's done well.
The question is, was $10 million enough, or are you going to increase that?
$10 million is a start. That's to remain to be seen. But I just said what's important is that we've initiated the process. We're doing it collaboratively, and we'll take as time goes by. It's not a question of debating the money right now. It's a question of launching this, doing it collaboratively, and if we need more money, you're hearing from the Minister of Finance right now. We will provide the resources as necessary. Thank you.